All right, we are going to get started. I wanted to let a few of you know, or anyone know, that they're going to be bringing dessert by the table. So you're welcome to go get one now if you want to, if you're ready. But they're also just going to be serving at the table so that we can keep going. There is more food, and it does not, truly, it does not offend me. If that pork was so good you got to have another piece, please stand up and go get it while I'm talking. There's no problem with that whatsoever. So, Liz, were there any other announcements I needed to give? Okay. Also, I put these together, and I don't exactly always know how long they're going to run. If I go 8:05 or 8:10, number one, forgive me. Number two, if you need to leave because we said 8 o'clock, that won't offend me either. So take off when you need to. I just want to make sure that I get through everything tonight. So we entitled this talk, Mind Over Money. We've been working on it for quite a while. It's an important topic. We're going to be talking about your future. We're also going to be talking about money, your money. And when we combine talking about your future with talking about your money, many of you get a little unsettled in here. So tonight I want to invite you to relax. We are going to be having some fun together. You've already met some nice people at your table, people like you in many ways. And we're going to play some games. I'm not going to bring anyone up here to dance or anything. You're all going to get to stay right where you are. But we're going to have some fun tonight. But we are going to ask some tough questions, questions that probably you've asked yourself before, questions that need answers. And we're going to go through a kind of a three-part. You're not going to necessarily see these 3 points. Thank you very much. We're going to go through a three-part track tonight. The first is going to be the war for your money. So when you think about the game Tug of War, how many of you played Tug of War when you were a kid? It's great. My kids play it with me. We put 3 on this side and 3 on this side, and they tug Dad back and forth. But Tug of War is kind of the picture that I want you to have in your head. There's a tug of war going on right now for your money, and there's a tug of war going on in a lot of ways right now for your mind in order to get at that. Okay? And we want to talk about what this war is about, what it's over. We want to talk about who the players are and what their methods are. And we want to talk about what your best response can be and how you can win it. So that's essentially what we're going to be talking about with respect to tonight's topic, mind over money. So we're going to start with the war for your money. I get stats all the time in financial journals. And 3 of them I see periodically over and over again. The first one is, how old are all of you getting, right? So how old is the general public getting? They want to tell financial planners this because that tells me what kind of products you might be interested in or when you're planning on rolling over your IRA or something like that. The next stat that I hear often is how much money you all have, right, in the stock market. More importantly, the directionality of that money. Where are you putting it? Are you moving it into the market right now? Or are you moving it out of the market at the moment? And this also can tell us as financial advisors or the financial community what kind of products you might be interested in right now, or what you might want to be doing, or what you might be feeling based on what you're doing. And the third one, it's always comes out, it's pretty high right now. The third one is how many of you, general public, are currently considering changing your financial advisor relationship. You can imagine why that one might be important to someone like me. I remember in 2011, the market had come way down in 2008. It came back quite a bit, came down again a little bit, and in 2011, that number hit 83 or 84%. So somebody does these polls. I don't know if you've ever gotten a call and someone asked you, are you considering changing your financial planning relationship? And if you answered yes or no. But these polls are done, and that number hit 83%. It's well over 50% still right now. There's a lot of dis or unsettlement, if you will, look for the word here, out in the marketplace right now by Americans, by investors. But I'm also tracking another number generally, and this one I looked up again Monday or Saturday, I can't remember when I saw it, and that is the total value of the U.S. stock market. Okay, so you take publicly traded companies only, dissect out bonds, dissect out privately traded companies. Publicly traded companies, you go to the real small companies and the real big companies, everything in the middle, micro-cap companies. You take all of their common stock and you add it all together. Now, we know how much our national debt is right now, right? How much is our national debt? 17 trillion is the going number, plus or minus, right? How many of you think the total value of the U.S. stock market is more than the national debt? How many of you think it's more than the national debt? The total value of the U.S. stock market. A few hands over here. A few hands over here. The total value of the U.S. stock market right now is 19.5 trillion, and it's expected to be 20 trillion by the end of the year. Now, I'm not sure what that does. It settles me a little. Think about this. This is just the publicly traded companies. This is not the privately held businesses like mine and many of yours. Has some value in it. It doesn't account for bank accounts or CDs. It doesn't account for the equity in your homes. It doesn't account for the bond market. A conservative estimate of the net worth of Americans right now is 3 or 4 times that number. 60, 70, 80 trillion dollars is probably a good picture of what United States citizens are worth. Pretty big. Now, who knows this? The media knows it, right? They know it. They can get us all in a frenzy or pretty freaked out in about 30 seconds, right? They've got about 17 seconds to do it, and they figured that out. Politicians know it. They know it's not a good idea, in my never humble opinion, to keep raising taxes, but the politicians know the money is there. It is there. We can pay the bill. Hope there are no politicians in the room just hearing me admit that right out loud, right? But guess who else knows it? Mutual fund companies know it, right? And there's a war for it. And the point in my bringing these stats to you is to tell you just how much money is there. It's not a small prize. We tend to think of ourselves, and that's a good thing. We don't necessarily want to keep looking over the fence, but we tend to think of ourselves and our portfolio, and we don't necessarily think about the context of what this all entails. You add the stock market and the bond market, and mutual fund companies are at war for a very, very large sum. They just need a small percentage of it to do very, very well. Now, to get at that, they need to get at your mind. So in order to get the money into their coffers, there's also a war for your mind going on right now. And this war starts at a very young age. 600,000 4th through 12th graders went through the stock market game in 2012. This is a picture of the winners from the 2009-2010 year. The stock market game sounds good, but kids are given a bank account of fake money, a couple $1,000s, and then they're given a list of stocks, maybe every stock, and they're given some financials, and the kids are expected or advised to start buying and selling, right? Now, the kids are doing this with fake money before they're ever taught what prudent investing is, before they're ever taught how to diversify, before they're ever taught how to expose themselves to enough of an asset class to make risk mitigated, before they're talking about rebalancing, before they're talking about any of the prudent realities, we're being taught, our kids are being taught, how to speculate. This is also after behavioral economists and psychologists have proven that the feelings or emotions we get when we buy and sell stocks are almost identical to the feelings or emotions we get when we gamble. You're not surprised by that. I know you're not. It's true. The feelings or emotions we get when we buy and sell stocks to try to make a profit are almost identical to the feelings and emotions we get, and yet this is how we're teaching kids how to invest, right? And it starts at a very young age. But it matters because this isn't really a game, right? We're not talking about fake cars that you filled up with fake gas and a fake debit card tonight. We're not talking about a fake mortgage that you're trying to pay off. We're talking about real goals. And we're talking about real dreams that you have. And what I found over time is that many folks, by the time I talk to them, maybe they're 30, maybe they're 40, maybe they're 50, maybe they're 60, they've had enough experiences in the market to be pretty jaded about it. And they started off planning. They used maybe a conservative percentage rate, 7%, or maybe they used an aggressive percentage rate of 9%. And they're planning for their future, and they realize at some point, hey, they're not getting these returns. The market's getting these returns, but we're not getting these returns. And so we become a little jaded. It reminded me of a story. It's an actual experiment with 5 monkeys. These poor monkeys in the financial industry, they always get picked on. But these 5 monkeys, this is real, this really happened, are in a nice big pen. And it's a fun place. They have things to climb on. They have ropes to swing on, all kinds of fun things to do. And in the middle of this pen is a tall, skinny ladder. You can't get to it from any other implement, but there's a tall, skinny ladder in the middle. And every morning a bell rings, and a bunch of bananas is lowered through the roof onto the top of this ladder. And what do you think happens? The monkeys make for the ladder, right? Well, they get close to the top of the ladder, and they pretty quickly realize only one of these monkeys is going to fit on the top of this ladder, right? So they start fighting for it. And they start scratching and clawing and throwing each other off. And sure enough, pretty soon, one of the monkeys gets to the top of the ladder and starts eating the bananas and starts throwing down the peels. The other four monkeys, however, didn't make it to the top. They get sprayed with water at the bottom. Okay? And if you're wondering, the monkeys do not like the spraying. All right? So the four monkeys that didn't get the bananas are getting sprayed with water. What happens the next day is that maybe a different monkey makes it to the top, and the other four monkeys get sprayed with water. But pretty quick, the monkeys that haven't made it to the top realize that it's a lot easier to keep anyone from getting to the top than it is to getting there yourself, right? So pretty quickly, they start just beating on each other, and after a while, none of them make it to the top, and none of them eat the bananas, and none of them get sprayed. Pretty good deal. No bananas, but we don't get sprayed with water. Well, they make this a little bit more interesting. They take one of the monkeys out, and they put in a new monkey, right, in the afternoon, long after the bananas have been pulled. The next morning, the bell rings, there's a new monkey in the cage, and the bananas get lowered to the top of the ladder. This new monkey's looking at the other monkeys who are sitting there thinking, shoot, this is just about the easiest thing gift I've ever received. So he starts shooting up this ladder. Next thing you know, he gets a pummeling, the likes of which he has never experienced, right? These other four monkeys are not going to get sprayed. So this fifth monkey has no idea what just happened, but he's not going to go for the bananas. You pull out another monkey, and they do the same thing to him. After a while, there is not one monkey in this cage that ever experienced the water, and they're beating the tar out of each other, making sure none of them get to the top of this ladder. And I think, is that a good estimation of how we feel as investors sometimes? Maybe it's a little bit overboard, but we've been pummeled or sprayed so many times that maybe we stop planning, or we stop believing that planning is worth it, or we start using 4%. How many of you have used 4% in a planning module just to be sure? Right? We don't use the market return anymore because we don't necessarily believe it. And neither do we believe that we're going to be taken care of from cradle to grave, right? We don't believe, this isn't a political statement, but we don't believe our health care needs are all going to be taken care of. We know we need to save something. We're assuming we need to do something. And when I say dreams and future, I'm not talking about lifestyles of the rich and famous here. I'm talking about real things. I'm talking about real needs. I'm talking about your needs, the things on the list that you guys are trying to pay for. And many of us have completely given up. You don't have to look too far to see that many of us are giving up. We know it in the news. 50 million people are on some kind of food subsidy right now. 50% of graduates will not get a job in their field. Yesterday on the news, I heard 90 million Americans are unemployed or underemployed. Things are not great right now, and we're not necessarily feeling excited about tomorrow. This reminded me of another verse. I thought about this. A person who asked me, why do you pray? And then the next time now I read the Bible and pray in front of a whole group. That's a nice way to punish that poor guy, right? But here's another Bible verse, whether you like it or not here. Proverbs 29, verse 18 says, where there is no vision, the people perish. And I think to some extent, we're seeing that. We're feeling that right now. I think about this, and I'm going to play a little video. There's no sound. You can just watch it while I talk. This past year, a year ago, my wife and I had the opportunity for our 15th wedding anniversary to go back to the Netherlands. I say back. I've been there once with my family. My parents took me back. Both of my parents are from there. They're from a northern province called Friesland. And this barn and the field, about 2 or 3 acres around it, is my mom's dad's, or was my mom's dad's barn and field. And it's probably my favorite video or picture. I took it from my iPhone. I tilted it there to get out of the car. I wish I would have done a better job because it's becoming one of my favorite memories or my favorite mementos from this trip. This is where my grandfather stored his equipment. He planted vegetables in this field. He planted tulips in this field. in the brick part in the back there. He held the tulips. This was a more of an ecologically safe place where it was a little bit more consistent, and he could dry the tulips and he could plant some and sell some. And this barn and farm represented, for my mom's parents, a better than average lifestyle. And yet, they left. And yet they thought, hey, we should think about more. There's this idea that we hear in the news all the time. I don't know who started it, but this idea that we're owed a better life than our parents, or that our kids are owed a better life than their parents or than us. I am sure glad that was lost on my grandfather, who was very willing to leave something that was pretty well set up for him. He had a lot. Now, by our standards, this isn't a lot, but by his standards, this was a fine life, and it was probably better than the life he came from, that he was building. And yet he sacrificed it. He did it for a vision for the future. And I want to make this point, a couple of them here, and then we're going to get into some information about investing here. The quality and the impact on your life, will in large part be determined by the quality for your vision of your vision for the future. The quality and the impact of your life will be in large part determined by the quality and vision for your future. And your future vision will be influenced most, I think, by the quality of the questions that you're willing to ask and answer. One of those questions that I want to ask and answer, and this relates very well to investing and to our money, is this one. And you all have something in front of you to write with. If you have one piece of notepaper between you, you can turn it sideways and write together. I want you to write down, you don't have to share them. I'll ask a few people to share one or two. I want you to take a moment and write down your 3 biggest fears. Write down your 3 biggest fears. If you can think of one, that's great. If you can't think of any, think a little harder. I don't like to admit I'm afraid of anything, but I have to admit it. I am sometimes. What are your 3 biggest fears? Who's willing to just mention one? Go ahead. Not having enough for retirement. That is a real fear. Yes, Dottie.
Not being able to live independently.
Yeah, not being able to live independently. It's a real one. That's great. Any others? Anyone else have one they want to share? Can't see all the hands. Yes, Sharon. That you'd be dependent on your children. Yeah. I think that one probably resonates. So let's take a look at this from a financial perspective. We get these fears in our heads sometimes. I think we all have them to a certain extent. And it can drive us into a bit of a scarcity mode, right? A scarcity mode that says we're not necessarily going to make it, right? And when we make decisions out of this kind of a mode, we generally don't necessarily make good ones. And we all get there sometimes. So why do we feel this way? I think we feel this way, and we don't want to overthink this. I think we feel this way very simply because we're afraid something is going to happen that will cause us not to be okay. We can state this complexly, or we can state this simply. I think when you boil it down, I think we're afraid because we're afraid something's going to happen that is going to cause us to not be okay. And unfortunately, this is also the state of many investors today. They don't necessarily know how to invest. They don't know how to build a portfolio and to manage it well. And they're concerned that they're not going to get the return that they're expecting. And then something else happens, maybe a job loss, maybe a health-related issue, maybe a relational issue, something that they couldn't control. And as badly as they want to control things, they can't. And then they approach a period of time like the last 10 years, and they get pummeled and sprayed. You know, tech bubble, the housing bubble, commodities trade bubble. We've all experienced these things, and to some extent we've had some anxieties about these things, and in this room many of us have lost a considerable amount to these mountains, to these up and down charts. And to a certain degree, or differing degree I guess, many of us approach this. I ask a question in my initial planning periods to get a gauge for where people are with this thing called investing. And one of the questions I always ask, many of you remember it, is on a scale of 1 to 10 right now, rate your peace of mind about your future and about your investing. How many of you remember me asking you that question? All right? Many of you I asked that question of. I'm not going to ask you to give a number right now, but on a scale of 1 to 10, my clients answer it. And I always get anywhere from 4 to 7 or 4 to 9, sometimes like that. I got my first 2 the other day, and this was a lot of what caused them to be very jaded and very nervous. Just one thing after another didn't go well for them in the last 10 or 15 years. And then we look at the exacerbation of this issue. What does Wall Street do? And we talked in our email invitations that we were going to talk about the 3 types of Wall Street bullies. These are the players, okay? Those the enemies, I guess we would want to call them, of our peace of mind, the enemies of us prospering as investors. And the first type of Wall Street bully are the con men. So I'm going to lay down a little bit of background music here, and you're going to get where I'm going here in a couple minutes. I'll let it go. Figure out exactly where we're going. This is called Bad Boys. Reed Slatkin, $600 million Ponzi scheme. You can feel it, right? 800 investors. Now these are people like you and I. 800 investors with 600 million. So many of these investors had $1 million or less. Okay? These are real people. Alan Stanford, he's a Texas billionaire. He pulled off an $8 billion Ponzi scheme selling certificates of deposit, CDs. You're buying a guarantee, right? Thomas Peters, $3.65 billion Ponzi scheme. You might know why I'm leaving the big section blank there. There's a big black section. Who do you think I'm going to put up there? There he is. This guy strikes fear just looking at him, right? If I get a question more consistently, it's this one. How do I know you're not Bernie Madoff? Really, people ask me, and I'm never afraid to answer it. It's really quite easy to avoid a Ponzi scheme. You just need a custodian that's different than your investment manager. People ask me all the time, why do I have to get all these Charles Schwab statements? I don't invest with Charles Schwab. Well, Charles Schwab, you pay Charles Schwab $32 a month to give you a statement so that you know what your Matson Money statement says is accurate. I think it's pretty worth doing. I don't know, $32 to know for sure, right? It's very easy to avoid this. But what we can learn, I think, more than from the con men, I think we can learn from the victims. Because the victims were what are called sophisticated investors. How many of you have heard that phrase? Many of you have even been called the sophisticated investor. The sophisticated investor is a government term used to describe someone who has $1 million or $200,000 in income. If you have $1 million to invest or $200,000 in income, you're considered a sophisticated investor. And really what the government wants to do is put a name out there for someone who has something to lose, and therefore you're allowed to use hedge funds and commodities futures where someone who doesn't have that amount of money is not allowed to be sold something like that. Okay? But this word sophisticated investors gets into people's heads because it's not necessarily that they're smarter just because they have $1 million. It's not necessarily true that they know how to invest just because they have it. You look at Ezra Merkin, he was a financial advisor. He was a sophisticated investor himself, and he was a financial advisor to many other sophisticated investors. And it looks like he just found out at this point that the Ponzi scheme was happening. He does not look good. $1.8 billion of his own and his clients' money were tied up in this thing. Larry King had $1 million of his own money tied up in this. Larry King, by every definition, is a sophisticated investor. Why wasn't he doing the math? We know this. You cannot receive 12 monthly statements in a row with a 1% return on every one of them for a 12% return without risk. That can't happen 4 or 5 years in a row. The market does not play favorites just because I'm sophisticated, right? The market does not discriminate. Uma and Arpad, I'm not sure if they're still together, and I'm pretty sure this picture was taken before they lost $230 million of their own money. We know Uma. Arpad is a hedge fund manager, but this $230 million represented just his own money. I don't think he put his own money in the hedge fund that he managed, which is also very common. Walter Noel, he's the ringleader at $7.5 billion. Fairfield Greenwich is the hedge fund that he managed in New York City. $4.5 billion of the hedge fund in New York City was in this, plus another $3.5 billion of his own and other clients' money in the Ponzi scheme. $7.5 billion gone. And he was a sophisticated investor to sophisticated investors. He was sophisticated. We leave this one for last because it's the saddest one. René Thierry, he's a French aristocrat, and he catered to other French families that were all very well-to-do. This was all very old money in these families. We just watched the what's it called, honey, the show we're watching? Downton Abbey, that's the one. And Lord Grantham just lost the family estate by betting on a bad stock. How many of you seen Downton Abbey? This is very old money, right? Well, René Thierry learned about the Ponzi scheme. He had $1.5 billion in the Bernie Madoff fund and lost it all, and he committed suicide over it. He couldn't face it. He didn't have to face anyone in one of his homes. He was found dead. And these are sophisticated investors. I have a clear message to my clients, whether you're watching this online or whether you're here. You are not sophisticated, okay? The market doesn't play favorites. You cannot predict the future. Just because you know someone who's promising 12% a year without risk, and this person seems smart and sophisticated, doesn't mean it's real, okay? And so there is no such thing as a sophisticated investor. They're concentrated. These are the Bernie Madoff victims, but it's not hard to see why they're concentrated in the Bay Area, San Diego, South Florida. You've got Boston and New York and D.C. area, Chicago. I like being in this nice little clear spot right here in mid-Michigan. All of us have our heads on the ground a little bit, our feet on the ground, right? A little bit more realistic, I think, by and large. But it's not hard to see why this group of people gravitated to this. I mean, they kind of get it in their head. And when you get $1 million, I won't ask for a show of hands, but you start to be treated a little differently from investment advisors when you start to have some money. They start to tell you that you're smarter. They start to tell you that you should have more sophisticated products and all kinds of special treatment. But you know what? In this room, if you've got $2,000 or if you've got $2 million, you're going to be in the same stock market with the same attributes, and you'll get treated very much similarly by it. And if you don't behave correctly, you'll get taken by it as well. And the largest ones have been. So that message, there are no sophisticated investors, is very, very important. The next bully are the prognosticators. The con men, like I said, are very easy to avoid, and they very likely won't happen, but the prognosticators will get into all of our heads. These are the people who predict the future. These are the people who tell us when the markets are going to go up. They tell us when markets are going to go down. They tell us what the GDP is going to be next year, and they tell us about things like fiscal cliffs. So what I did is I Googled a gloomy economic forecast, and I came up with 5 things, all pretty gloomy-ish. If you ask me, unresolved conflicts in the Middle East, slowing economic growth in China, the rising national debt, inflation is low, interest rates are rising, and don't we all feel nice and warm and fuzzy? But on the same day, I Googled a positive forecast. Historically low interest rates, that's true. Cash balances are at an all-time high for both households and corporations, that's a fact. Significant and recent gains in productivity, also a fact. Growth in potential emerging markets, recovery in the Eurozone, these are all things that have happened. Pretty rosy. Now, it's not that any one of us are going into the marketplace perfectly objectively, and approaching it and say, hey, what are the gloomies saying today, and what are the posies saying today, right? We don't go in there and then we'd evaluate. This is what happens. What happens is we go in with a predisposition. We go in feeling a certain way, and then we are attracted to a certain set of realities. That's how our minds work. I have an ego. Everyone here has somewhat of an ego, and we generally go looking for opinions until our egos are matched by them. That's what happens. That's what psychologists tell us we do. The media can be a little bit more insidious, a little bit more quiet about it. They'll say things like the market is moving up. Now, can they say that? Is it moving up? Just because it went up today, 45 points, it is moving up? I mean, it has moved up, but is it moving up? Depends on what the meaning of the word is, right? But it has moved up. We can say that. Today there are more buyers than sellers. No, they're not. There are exactly the same number of buyers and sellers. On any given day, if stocks sell, there is a buyer and there's a seller. There are not more buyers and sellers. I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to get me to think that the market's going to go up. So they say something like this. Right, here's another one. Sell U.S. stocks and buy European and Asian, says Morgan Stanley's Barton Biggs. So this big bear walks up to the camera, takes off his hat, and who is it? It's Barton Biggs. right? And he says, get out of the U.S. large company stocks. And by the way, stay away from Bill and Hillary. They're bad for the U.S. market. There's a prognosticator. And we may be gravitating toward that based on how we're feeling in 1993. Then, a few years later, in 1999, we have our friend Harry Dent. Harry Dent is the gift that keeps on giving. How many of you were at the movie event this summer that we did? Many of you. Harry Dent was interviewed there. Harry Dent uses a science. Anybody remember what the science is called? Science called demographics, right? And he appeared certain. Let me just read a few things from his latest book. Maybe it's not his latest. This is the one from 1999. A couple of quotes. Due to fundamentals of the market changing in a predictable manner, we should see a peak Dow of 21,500. Anyone know what the Dow is? The Dow is the industrial companies track. They're about 15,500 right now is where the Dow is. It peaked last at 14,090, and it went down. It's now up to 15,005. And he said the same book, he writes, that would allow for a Dow as high as 35,000 by 2007. That's Harry Dent for you. Maybe more telling than anything else is that the book retailed for $29 in 1999, and right now I think you can get it on eBay for about 39 cents. So the information in this book has seen its day. But you remember Barton Biggs. We talked about him. He said get out of U.S. stocks. He said that in 1993, and U.S. stocks went on about a 5 or 6 year tear of 22.5% per year for a total compounded rate of return of 273. And had you listened to the bear that day, or had your gut predisposed you to listen to the bear that day, you would have missed out on 273% compound return. Then we have Harry Dent in 1999. Now, who wouldn't be thinking the roaring 2000s in 1999? For those of you who had investments from 1993 to 1999, what were you thinking about the market? It is always going up. It has gone up for 5 years in a row if you were just in U.S. large companies, which most of us are. Most of us are not diversified at this stage. And so we think everything's going to keep going up. And so this was just placating to our predisposition. Our predisposition was, we've seen 6 years in a row going up. Yeah, I guess 35,000 seems really, I guess, more likely than any alternative. I guess, right? Let's go all in. Let's go. Negative 1% per year on average. It was worse in the early years, with a negative 9.1% return over that period of the roaring 2000s. So we just used his 10-year period that he had asked us to use in his book. The prognosticators are not right, and worse, they generally don't invest the way they say they're going to invest. Maybe some of the worst prognosticators are the mutual fund managers themselves. Mutual fund managers, it's tracked through Morningstar how many mutual fund managers own their own stock, own their own mutual funds, eat their own cooking, right? And it's only 49% of mutual funds that can tout any amount of stocks being owned by any one of the managers in the fund. Only 49% are eating their own cooking when it comes to mutual funds. Now, every dollar I have in the market is in the Matson Money Free Market Funds. And it is verified, every dollar that Mark Matson has invested in the market is in the Mark Matson Free Market Funds. We are eating our own cooking, and we are doing it because we believe in it, okay? And you need to know that. I need to be able to tell you that, and it's important for you to know. But there's one more type of Wall Street bully out there, and that's the guru. There's a new movie coming out with Ben Affleck and Justin Timberlake. I probably wouldn't recommend it with those two names, but I saw the trailer, and I think it's appealing, right? We've got Justin Timberlake, he's in financial trouble. Then you have this guru, Ben Affleck's character, and Ben Affleck can basically tell Justin how to do it. And he knows what's going to happen, he knows what the players are, and he can make Justin Timberlake an extremely wealthy person. Right? I think we want there to be a guru out there. We want to settle our fears, not necessarily with prudency sometimes. We want to settle our fears with someone who can tell us what's going to happen. And we're prone to want that, right? We want to know the future. And this Financial Advisor magazine, it reads, against all odds, Arnold Vandenberg has delighted his clients by beating the market over a 29-year period. But you know, it's statistically certain that with as many mutual funds as there are out there, an orangutan throwing darts at a board will beat the market over an extended period of time. This article should have read how monkeys throwing darts over a 29 period have beaten the market. Statistically, someone's going to do it, right? It's actually more likely to happen than it is to not happen. The problem is thinking we can know who's going to do it and when they're going to do it. Fortune magazine wanted to try to tell us. In 2000, they gave us their Retire Rich guide. This is the 10 stocks that would last the decade. This is from the all-time best stock pickers, probably fed to them by Morningstar. Fortune said they've identified 4 sweeping trends that appear certain, here's that word again, we want certainty so badly, to transform the way we work and interact. They sought out some of the top stock pickers in the country for help on this one. If you would have purchased all 10 of these stocks to last the decade, let's say you put $100,000 in the 10 stocks, $10,000 per stock. Over the next 27 months, you would have seen your $100,000 go down to about $38,000. These are the top stocks from the top pickers in the country over the next 27 months. But now they did say the decade, so let's give them the decade. And at the end of the decade, you'd have had $53,000. Now, quite honestly, they did say they were going to last the decade, and technically all 10 stocks lasted the decade. So they probably didn't actually lie. And I'm sure it feels really, really good when you're standing at, when you're staring at your portfolio of $53,000 to hear that. And we wonder why people have stopped using realistic numbers to plan, or they've stopped planning altogether. Fortune did it again. This was a month earlier. Let these guys make you rich. These were actually Morningstar 5-star fund managers. They took one from each sector whose research, they said, clearly stood apart. Okay? And I'm not sure what stood apart meant, but it sounds really good. So we're going to look at the first one. He said, buy Oracle. It's $72 today, but it's targeted at $115. Now, the market targeted at about $11 by the end of that year, and it was up to $29 by the end of the decade. But it was targeted at $115, and this was one of the top stock pickers people. The next one, CMGI, $440. This was a screaming buy. And you would have been screaming when it came to the end of that year, because that's what they call a 440% decline in your portfolio. No, it's not. It's what, 99% decline in your portfolio? And because of a reverse stock split, it came back into the single digits by the end of the decade, $3.26. CMGI actually changed their ticker symbol soon after that first decline. They couldn't seem to get any traction with CMGI. Global Crossing, we highlighted this one as well. Poor Frank Vigorito from our movie this summer was at $26. It could triple in a year. Could go to zero, could triple. Global Crossing went out of business in January 28, the next year, 2003. That was from one of the sector's top stock pickers. And then WorldCom, MCI, we know them, $45. It was dirt cheap, took a dirt nap by the end of the year. And it took me a long time to come up with those jokes. I appreciate that. At least 3 of you. Oh, I appreciate all 3 of you who laughed. That was very funny. Thank you. My wife doesn't thank you because now I keep using them at home. But so stock investing for dummies. This one is at Schuler Books, right next to this one. Brain surgery for dummies. Just because I own a scalpel doesn't mean I'm going to take my kid's head off and do brain surgery, right? And just because I know what an ETF stands for doesn't mean I'm going to put a portfolio of stocks together, balance them and weight them just right, rebalance them, and then make them more conservative over time using short-term, high-quality bonds, right? It doesn't mean I necessarily know how to do all that just because I know what ETF stands for. So let's kind of turn corners here. We went through the 3 con men. How do they create the illusion that they can do it, right? That's the question. So let's say you're kind of with me here. You're tracking. You're a reasonable person. You're logical. You're saying, so what if they can't? You know, what if they can't pick the stocks? Our response is, let's not do any stock picking. Let's not do any market timing. Let's not do any track record investing at all. Let's use the academic information that we have. But maybe you're asking that question. So who knows who this guy is? David Copperfield. What does he do for a living? An illusionist. Some people say magician. He's not a magician. He can't actually do magic. He's an illusionist. He makes us think things that aren't real or that aren't true. So I'm going to do a trick for you. I've got this little 6x6 orange hanky, and I am going to make it disappear. Okay? So I'm going to take this orange hanky, and I'm going to stuff it in my hand. I'll stuff it in my hand here. I'm not a very good illusionist, so I won't tout to be. But then I'm going to blow on my hand, because that's what it said to do on YouTube. Look, it happened. It worked. It's gone. I did it. Except that all along, I had this little plastic finger on my finger, right? And I had it in there all the time, right? You probably saw the plastic finger, didn't you, Joanne? I bet you did, maybe Bob. I'm not very good at being an illusionist. I'm not trying to be. But I wanted to give you a sense that even I can learn a little magic. Even I can do a quick illusion to get your minds in the right place for this next set of slides. My wife says I'm being mean now, but I'm going to do it anyway. Who's this? No, this is Britney Spears. Who's this? Pee Wee Herman? That's Pee Wee Herman. Oprah. This one's untouchable. My wife says, you shouldn't do this one, Evan. This is not nice. Good morning, Oprah. Macaulay Culkin, this poor boy, we should never have put him in here because it wasn't his fault. They made him do that movie when he was too young to say no, and that's a scary shot. Deborah Messing, and Nick Nolte, my favorite. Now, before you think I'm just being mean, I'm not just being mean. They spend millions and millions and millions of dollars creating these illusions, getting us to believe that something is one thing when it really is not. I mean, it really isn't. They create these illusions, and they use, in the investing industry or in the investing world, they use an illusion trick called the law of large numbers. Now, I want to have all of your involvement. In the middle of your tables, there's a little dish, a little votive, and in it are quarters. So each person here, including the Samuel boys, you have to play. So can I ask you guys to play my game? That's great, thanks. So everyone take a quarter, and I need you to stand up. 7th inning stretch, except that it's only the 4th inning from a time standpoint, just to give you a sense for where we're at. So everyone grab a quarter and stand up. Now each one of you represent a mutual fund company, and when you flip heads, you beat the market for a year, and when you flip tails, you lose to the market and you have to sit down. Okay? Now, everybody take your first flip now. Heads have to sit down. Tails have to stand up. Oh, I'm sorry, heads have to stand up. I should get this right, I apologize. Now I've screwed up the whole thing. I'm the mutual fund manager's manager. Heads are staying up, tails are sitting down. Get this right. Now, flip again, second flip. Heads are staying standing. Tails are sitting down. There's another quarter in there, Joanne. We can get another one right here.
Wait.
It's a tail, you have to sit down. Okay, third flip. Third flip, we should see 10 or so of you still standing. Who still has heads? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Wow, all of you guys are up. Yeah, that's great. Okay, 4 times. We should have 6 or more of you. There's 100 people in the room, so a percentage point. My mom is an amazing mutual fund manager. Maybe you should have been working with her. Still got one of the Samuel brothers. 3, 4, 5. We're doing about as well as the averages. 5 times. Flip again. That's right. Let's go number 6. Is anyone still standing for a 6th flip? Is that a 6th flip? Still heads? My goodness. 7. We are starting to lose heads. My goodness. I'm going to lose all my clients. And we still have 2. 8. Heads? Man. 9. I'm watching this guy. 9. Flip again. Tails. 9 times. Everybody give Blake a hand. Why did Blake flip so many heads? Because he's a good stock picker, right? It was statistically certain that someone would flip 7 heads in a row. It was more statistically certain that someone would do it than someone wouldn't do it. And he actually hit 8. That's a record for me. I've only had 7 in a seminar before. And if we're actually running a mutual fund company, this is when all the money starts to pour in, right? So if you've doubled money, or if you've beat the market 2, 3, 4 years, people start to give you some attention. Now people start to give you all their money. Now, people who put their money in here, do they get the return of these years? Winning the mutual fund game, if you're going to try to, means you need to pick Blake before we started. Right? Now, what is this? You're not going to know. This is written down in letters so small we can't read the names of every mutual fund put out on the market by Fidelity. 1,257 funds. What do you think the statistical reality is, or the statistical benefit would be to someone owning, say, 10 or 12 of those mutual funds if they got the very best ones? It's a statistical certainty that 10 or 12 of these mutual funds will do very, very well, right? 10% or 1% of these mutual funds, 10 or 12 of these funds, it's statistically certain that they won't just hit the market return, they'll probably beat it, and not by a little bit. It's actually more certain that that will happen than that it wouldn't happen. And the total number of mutual funds out there that you can choose from right now are 28,000. And the total number of stocks are 14,000. So 2 times as many mutual funds or combination of stocks as there are stocks. Now, if they really knew what was happening, how many funds would they need? If they knew what was going to happen? 1. What would they call it? The really big good fund. I liked the super duper one too. That was really good. No, we're just kidding. They wouldn't call it the really big good fund. The SEC would never allow that. But how many stocks would they need to own? 1. There's always one stock that's doing better than every other, and they would own it until it wasn't gonna, and then they would stop and they would own another one. If they really knew what was going to happen, these would be the stats, these would be the numbers, but that's not. And what's the result? What's the result of all of this prognosticating, all of this predicting of the future, all of this track record investing, all of this stock picking? What's the end result of it? The end result is that the average investor does not know really much about what they need to know to be a good investor. We're chasing after returns. We're chasing after people who got lucky. And we're not getting on board early enough to get the return. Most people do not realize that equities are, if managed correctly and diversified well and rebalanced on the highs and lows, most people don't realize that this is the greatest wealth creation tool available to us. And they don't know how to do it or how to manage it. Let me give you some examples. The U.S. microcap stocks from 1927 until 2012, thanks to a guy named Rex Sinkfeld, who's on the board of Dimensional Fund Advisors. He gave us all of this data and certified it all the way back to 1927 in all of these categories. The U.S. microcap stocks have returned 12.26%. Now, who would be happy with 12% in their portfolio over 40 years? Right? Quite a number of us. Now, you would have had to buy roughly 3,000 companies over the course of these 85 years and hold them all. And when one would either go out of business or go into the mid-cap range, you'd let it go. If they merged, you'd obviously let it go. But had you just simply owned it without any stock picking, without any market timing, without any track record investing in that one asset class, you'd have gotten 12.2%. In the U.S. large category, nearly 10. In the small value category, nearly 15. Value just stands for low price stock. Large value, just over 11.5. We go international and we have fewer years certified, but from 1970 till 2012, for 43 years, the international small category is nearly 14.5, and the international large is 9. Now, it would be kind of a fallacy for me to say all of this without then mentioning as well maybe the obvious, and that in any 1 or 2 year period, these aren't necessarily the returns you'd achieve. However, in a well-diversified portfolio where we have a long-term investor appropriately weighted in stocks versus bonds, These are very good returns that you should be able to expect to get, and you don't have to stock pick, you don't have to market time, and you don't have to use track record investing. None of it's required. Now, I'm sorry, but I just think that sounds a lot better than guessing to me. And you can do it. Introduce you to Mark Matson.
We have peaked above the trading range.
That's not Mark.
And we keep going higher.
Here's Mark.
One of the toughest things that I have, one of the toughest jobs I have, and the coaches I work with have, is keeping investors focused on the long run. There hasn't been a single period in the last 20 years, the last 90 years, where stocks haven't beaten fixed income over 20-year periods. And I'm always, harping on focus on the next 20 years, not the next 20 minutes or even the next 20 months. Long-term equities are the best wealth creation tool known to mankind. You got to be in it long-term. So I'm ignoring what's going on in the short run, keeping my investors disciplined.
Well, in the long run, we're all dead. We just went through a 10-year period where you didn't make any money.
Good point.
I got to completely go in and say that's wrong. Emerging market stocks over the last 10 years have made over 8% a year. Microcap U.S. stocks in the U.S., I'm talking U.S. now, 11% per year over the last 10 years. This was not a dead decade over the last 10 years, but you had to be diversified to get it.
Had to be diversified to get it. You had to be in the asset classes, in the hot sectors before they were hot, right? And that's exactly the opposite of what most of us are taught to do and what most of our 401ks are giving us even the ability to do, because they load these 401k plans up with the hot mutual funds from the past. Because what do we want to see? We want to see a track record, right? I don't want to see a market return in small company stocks at negative 38% and still buy it, right? Even though it's the prudent thing to rebalance into the one that just went down. We know that. We have to buy it low, but we don't want to buy the one that just had a negative year. So we look for the track record. We get on board with the one that, that just went and did really well. And again, I bring you back to the fact that this is important because, again, we're not talking about fake money and fake cars and fake gas and fake debit cards. We're talking about real money, real goals, real visions that you guys have had for your future, real dreams. And real dreams require real returns. And real returns mean something. Now, this is the point in the presentation where the mutual fund guy, the financial planner, would show you the top 10 mutual funds that they've been tracking. Wouldn't necessarily be the funds that their clients in the past have received. And this room wouldn't be full of their current clients anyway, because that's not the way the average system works. 65% of you actually are clients of mine in this room. And if you become a client of mine, you're expected to come back every quarter because this is part of what it takes to do this well. But you need real returns. What I'm about to show you is the actual real returns of free market fund clients who have invested with us over the past 20 to 22 years since the free market fund came about. These are actual real returns that clients achieved. It's not if you'd have done this, it's if you had been a client like these clients are, this is the return you'd have achieved. Now, an income and growth portfolio took $1 million to $2.3 million using 25% stocks and 75% fixed income. This entire dip of about 6 or 7%, 8%, was the top of the 2007 to the bottom of the 2009 March loss. If you had $100,000, the worst of it would have been about $92,000, $93,000, and it would have come back up. That's the income and growth. How many of you would have been happy with that over the last 22 years? That's 25% in the stock market. It's a pretty volatile free fund. The next one is, these are just benchmarks. There are more funds that you can actually choose from than this, but the Balanced Growth Fund is 50% stocks and 50% bonds, and these are the real client returns. Now, if you want to look this up, you can write down the four-letter acronym GIPS, GIPS. GIPS is a globally used fund tracking device that doesn't track the performance of a fund or a manager, but tracks the performance of all of the clients of a certain group. Because what does it matter if a mutual fund did well if none of the clients in it did well? So these are the actual client returns. Take $1 million to 3.2. This decline was about, just from top to bottom, it was about 23% decline, and still took the money triple over a 22-year period. This is the long-term growth. This is 75% stocks and 25% bonds and fixed income. It took $1 million to just about 4 times that. And then the aggressive growth took $1 million to 4.5 million with a rocky road in the last few years. But again, these are not people who are saying we're retiring right now. Right? These are folks who are saying we're young, we've got 15 to 20 years left, I can remain aggressive. So this didn't mean a lot to the folks that should be in this fund, and they're still on their way to a much better total number because of that place. But any one of these, again, sometimes will do better than what many of us have been experiencing. Now, despite everything we've discussed so far tonight, the gurus, the con men, the media, all the hype that goes on, the biggest issue is still inside of us. It's our nature not to invest well. So we do need to look at that a little bit, and I'm going to ask you to get involved one more time, and you may be able to do this sitting down, you may have to stand up to do this, but we're going to play tie the knot. And I've got a new rule for you. How many of you all know how to tie a knot? Everybody, right? Everybody knows how to tie a knot, but I'm going to ask you to tie a knot with one rule. Once you pick up the string, you may not let go of it with either hand. You may not let go of it with either hand once you pick it up, and you still need to get it tied. Yes, you have to use both hands. One on each end. And you can't tie your arm into it. It needs to be a knot into the middle of the rope. It is possible. I will show you in mere minutes. One knot in the middle, no loops. Nancy's got a loop. No loops. No loops. And you can't use your teeth, no teeth. You did it? Okay. Did you move your hands? There you go. Okay, here it is. Here we are, right? No, that's not difficult, right? It's not at all difficult. The problem is we know how to tie a knot, right? And we know it kind of in here. We've already forgotten how to tie a knot. We know how to tie a knot so well. The issue is the new rule caused us to have to think about this a little bit differently, and it's a really good illustration about how you're going to have to think differently about investing, because you all came in here knowing how to invest. We have to find the best stock pickers, or pick them, buy low, sell high, do their track records and learn all that stuff, right? That's how we're all taught. That's what we're taught, because that's what the government says we need to know, and that's what gets put on the statement. But the problem is we have to get outside of the box, and the other problem is you're the box, and so somehow we have to do something more. So I can tell you, and I can teach you how to do it right, but I'd rather show you. So this may be a little time where you want to take notes. This is the 7th inning stretch, okay? So we're coming around the back side into home. We're going to talk about your mind and the components of it that are working for and against you. You're going to get this, aren't you? She's got it. She did it. Nice. Perfect. The investor's mind, okay? There are 4 components of it, and we need to understand all 4. This pictogram is going to be helpful. There's the cognitive. This is the part that aggregates stats and realities and truths and facts. Then there's the perception. This is how we see things. Sometimes how we see them correctly, sometimes how we see them incorrectly. Then there's our instinct. This one goes right back into that little, I think it's called the medulla, right? This is the part of the brain that helps us breathe, those functions that we don't really need to think about. They're just instinctual. There are urges. And then there's emotions. There's how we feel. Right? So we're going to look at each one of these. If I wanted to put this into an equation, and this is what you may want to write down, to pursue investment success, we need to make the cognitive greater than our instinct, our emotions, and our perceptions, all added together, magnified by the media, which we already know will use those things against us to get us to click to the next article or watch through the commercial, right? So we need to get the cognitive to be higher than these things. And the cognitive, again, is what we know. But what we know isn't always enough, right? Because I can tell you that investing is as simple as owning equities, diversifying them, and rebalancing them. Simple enough, right? Own equities, diversify them, rebalance them, and as you get older, mix in some short-term, high-quality bonds for stability. That's how easy investing is. But then why do investors fail and people gain weight? Gaining weight or losing weight is pretty simple. right? You move a little more and you eat a little less. In theory, that should be about it. But at the end of the day, we tend to have investors who lost money and us dieters who gain weight. We tend to do just the wrong thing, right? Our behavior, encapsulated by that parenthesis, often overtakes the cognitive. What we want to do, what we feel like doing is overriding the cognitive, what we know. So let's look at instincts. What is this? Pain, right? If I stab myself in the leg, I'm going to turn up, it's going to bleed and it's going to hurt, so I'm going to stop doing that, right? Pain is good. It helps me to stop doing things that are going to hurt me, helps me survive. And we move away from pain. And then there's pleasure. We all like pleasure. We like love. We like comfort food. That's why I fed you the comfort food early, so that I could give you all this pain later. We move toward pleasure. Right? But this isn't always perfectly applied because our survival instincts sometimes get mixed up. How many people can think of something that's painful that's actually good for us? Exercise. How about chemotherapy? Many other things, right, that are painful, but they're actually good for us, and we need to do it. And then similarly, things that are pleasurable, but they're not so good for us. Halloween candy? Kit Kats for me, and candy corns. That's where I'm at. Not where you're at, but too much of that, and it's probably not good for us. So our instincts mess us up a little bit. We tend to, again, not be able to trust those exactly. Let's look at our 2008 investment statement and see how our instincts play into our evaluation of things. The long-term government bonds at the end of 2008 went up 26%. Pleasure, move toward. We look at the statement in U.S. small stocks, negative 38%. Pain, move away, right? So what do? We call our broker and we say, sell, buy, right? Sell, buy. Let's move away from pain. Let's move toward pleasure. Now let's open 2009 statement. Ouch, we just lost more money. 2009 statement, we just lost the ability to take back some of the money we lost on the other one. Moving away from pain and toward pleasure doesn't necessarily assist us. Our instincts don't necessarily always assist us in how we invest. Let's take a look at emotions. A lot of times folks will say you just have to be able to divorce yourself from emotions, and if you can do that, then you can be a good investor, right? But that isn't true. You need your emotions to make the very best decisions in all of your life. Many of you who are here with someone didn't make that decision on a balance sheet, I would imagine. If you did, I would disavow it and tear it up, and not agree that you did. But the emotions, we need to use them. We don't want to work against them. But let's play this name that emotion game. So it doesn't matter how sophisticated his charts are or how much sense he makes. I just don't feel comfortable letting him handle my money. Which emotion is that? Mistrust. I'm not sure if I should have put my money in that fund. It's already lost 15%. Maybe I'll sell some of it tomorrow. Which emotion is that? Regret. My boss got 25% on his money, and I only made 8%. I wish I had 25%. Envy, jealousy, yep. I wish I had known that stock was going up. I would have bought more shares. Greed. My dad worked in that company all his life, and he left his money to me in his will. It would be wrong for me now to sell those stocks of that company and diversify, just to diversify. Loyalty or guilt, you could have guilt in there to sell it, loyalty to stick. What if the market drops tomorrow and I lose everything? Fear. That's right. So our emotions play a great toll on us. We can't just separate ourselves from them. That doesn't make sense. If you do that, you're separating yourself from all of your emotions, and you don't want to live that way. You're not going to live that way. We have to recognize them, and we just have to call them what they are. So now the perceptions. And the perceptions is how we see, our perception is how we see the world. There's a little video I'm going to play, and I want you all just to concentrate on what the person asks you to do, and just make the count, and then maybe write the number down, and I'll ask what you got, okay? Takes about a minute.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count?
13,
The
14?
correct answer is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla?
Who saw the gorilla? Watch. There he is. He was there. I saw it. He does a little jig in the middle. See him right in the middle? Yeah, I didn't really notice he was there. The gorilla walked into the middle of the whole field, did one of these, and walked out. And half of us didn't see it. I didn't see it the first time I watched it. We sometimes don't see what we see, right? Let's do another one. Which one of these tables is longer, the one on the left or the one on the right? You're lying if you don't tell me your eyes think this one is the longer one, right? Now, I can prove to you, and you can maybe get there if you work at it, that these tables are exactly the same length, but you take it away and your eyes go right back to thinking the one on the left. We don't perceive things, we don't see things exactly the way they are. Our perceptions are flawed, right? Now, we talked about the media. I'm not going to badger them enough other than to maybe give them credit for maybe their one big perception act to get you to see something that wasn't really there. We have all heard the phrase that I'm going to put on the next screen, but there really is no such thing as a fiscal cliff. We believe there is. A lot of us do. It's a big fear of many of ours, right? And the media has caused us to perceive it. Part of the reason we want to perceive it is that it kind of gets into our emotions, right? Our instincts kind of tell us, yeah, that makes sense. It all makes sense, right? So we kind of fear it. And I bring this up just to highlight again one more time, just very quickly, that media does compound all of these things that are kind of already there working inside of us. It causes this little sign to flip over and do exactly what it ought not do, which is take what you know away. So the big problem, the main issue is that you don't know what you need to know, and you know a bunch of stuff that you really don't need to know to be a successful investor. Now I've got this thing on. There we go. I think I held it too long. It's going off for the whole time here. We know that we need to invest prudently. We know that we have to diversify and that we need to rebalance on the lows and not panic. But our instincts tell us often to do the wrong thing. Our perceptions come in and make us see something that might not be there, or we miss something that is, and our emotions tie us up in knots. And then the media comes in and they bring us the horror and they bring us all the other stuff. But other than that, it's pretty easy to be a good investor, right? Other than all that, other than everything that's kind of warring inside of us. So what are we going to do? I told you one of my heroes were in the beginning part of this, and I'll show you the picture again of this barn. But I didn't tell you something else about this barn. This barn is where my grandfather, we called him Paka. Paka is the Frisian name for grandfather. And Paka lived in this barn for a little while. They lived in the Netherlands during the German occupation, my family, my mom's family. And the only reason I know this is because my mom was the oldest in her family and was taken into the confidence of her parents and rode her bike down the road every day to bring her dad food and other supplies, maybe books, a Bible probably, and took care of him in there. How long? A couple of weeks. So for 2 weeks, Paka was in this barn. I'm talking about vision tonight, and I'm talking about creating a vision, something that's 5 or 6 or 8 or 20 years down the road, and doing something today to bring that vision into reality. We talked about the investing piece of that. It's real, but we also have to do the visioning. And I don't know when Paka decided to leave the Netherlands, or when Paka and Beppa, his grandma, decided to leave the Netherlands, but I like to think it was while he was sitting in that barn. He couldn't see more than 6 feet in either direction, but I bet he had a vision longer than most of us have the ability to have today, sitting in that barn, waiting till it was safe again to come out so that he didn't have to go and work in the factory. That trip was sometimes a one-way trip for a lot of guys in the Netherlands. And I'm thankful that he did it. I don't know if I'll ever get to sacrifice for my children like he did, but I hope I do. I know my parents did. I know my wife's parents did. Sacrificed a lot for us. But I want to develop a vision. I want to ask my clients to reignite their vision, to think about their vision. And then I want to look at the two types of investors that there are. You can do this. I'm the youngest in my family. I can't let a deep moment go very long. I have to tell a joke pretty quickly. Or you can get in the game. And by that I mean stand up to the bullies, punch them in the nose, and get it over with. Stop doing it. Stop doing all that stuff. And so my question for you is, are you ready to do that? And being ready doesn't mean you're going to start a mutual fund or start buying and selling stocks or mutual funds. Being ready is that you're going to start to get this information. And I'll talk about the cards that are on your table in a minute. But first I want to go through the 20 questions that are there. Everyone that becomes a client of mine sees this 20 questions 4 times a year if you come. These 20 questions are what we coach to and what we end with. And I'm going to go through each one of them. And there's a rule when you're taking this. You have to answer yes only to those questions where you are 100% sure it's a yes. And to take it a little step further, you could explain your yes to somebody and it would make sense. Okay? So answer yes only if you're 100% sure and you could explain it to somebody. Okay? Question number 1, we'll go through these quickly. Have you discovered your true purpose for money? That which is more important than money itself. This goes along with your vision, but why are you saving? Don't spend too much time on these. We'll just go through them quickly. Give us your first answer. Question 2, I'm not going to ask you to hand them in either. You get to keep these. Are you invested in the market? Yes or no? Do you have stocks? Question 3, do you know how markets work to set prices? Question 4, have you defined your investment philosophy? Do markets work to set prices, or can people beat the market, essentially? Have you defined which one of those you believe? Question 5, have you identified your personal risk tolerance? In a market crash, how much could you lose? We can put a number on it, and then we can diversify to it. It's not that difficult. Question 6, do you know how to measure diversification inside your portfolio? 7, do you consistently and predictably achieve market returns? Question 8, have you measured the total amount of commissions and costs in your current portfolio? And if you're working with us and you're curious, because you haven't been able to do it on your own, please call. We do what's called a statement review. We'd love to show you what your total costs are. They're all written on every statement. None of it's hidden. Question 9, do you know where you fall on the Harry Markowitz efficient frontier? Question 10, when it comes to building your investment portfolio, do you know exactly what you're doing and why? I don't mean this tongue-in-cheek. I actually want my clients to know and be able to explain what they're doing, why they're doing it. Question 11, are you working with a financial coach versus a financial planner? 12, do you have a customized lifelong game plan to guide all of your investing and spending decisions? 13, do you have an investment policy statement? 14, have you devised a clear-cut method for measuring the success or failure of your portfolio? 15, do you fully understand the implications and the applications of diversification in your portfolio? 16, do you have a system to measure portfolio volatility, the ups and downs? 17, are you aware of the costs associated with purchasing commission-based products? 18, do you know the 3 warning signs that you may be speculating with your money versus prudently investing it? I'll give you the yes on this one. It's stock picking, market timing, and track record investing. You can all check yes. Those are the warning signs. Can you identify the cultural messages about and personal mindsets about money that destroy your investing peace of mind? Can go into that one more, one-on-one. Question 20, are you ready to shift your personal experience of money and investing from a scarcity mode to an abundance mode where you can live your life rather than obsessing about your assets? And that's where we'll end. There's a card, I just want to explain it, and I would like everybody to fill it out if you don't mind. We are not a high-pressure group. We're not going to hound you. But if you would, just put your name and address on there, a phone number that you use, a cell number or something that we can use to get a hold of you. We don't sell any of this information. Your email address, fill in those few. If you think we have it, sometimes your email changes. We'd like to keep up to date, so go ahead and fill that out. One per couple is fine if you're here together. And then there's 4 items you could coach. If you're new here tonight, if you were a guest of someone or you just showed up because you got an email, you can check that first box. Yes, I want to meet with a qualified financial coach. If you do, on the way out, we'll give you a CD to listen to, and you get 45 minutes on the phone with me or in person with me for free. And I'll give you an investor inventory, we call it, just a conversation that helps you understand who we are and me understand who you are. It's totally free. There's no obligation afterwards. But I'd really like for you to take advantage of that. I'd like to go into more depth one-on-one with what this could mean. This is a great atmosphere, but it doesn't do what a one-on-one can. If you're a client of mine and it's been a little while and you'd like to come in, you're always welcome. My time is yours. Just check that second box and Liz will set up a time for us to meet together. I would love for every one of you to feel welcome to come to January 29's event. We're putting it together now. It's going to be the 29th is a Wednesday, I believe. It's probably going to start at 5:30 and go till 7:30 or 8. You can check that box even if you're just interested. You don't have to know your calendar, but if you check the box about the 29th, you can just get on the interested list. And then lastly, many of you are here with family. And I would like to give you an opportunity to talk with me sometime about how to get your family involved with doing things the right way. Many of my clients who are 50 and 60 and 70 say they wish they could talk to their kids about money, or they wish that they could make sure that their kids didn't make some of the same mistakes that they made. And I am very willing to get super creative about this. I would take this into your living room if you said your family was going to be there, and I would give this presentation there. I will do for you, my clients, what it takes to help you get your family involved with knowing how to do this right. So if you're interested in just talking about that, checking the box does not mean I'm showing up with cake and a video projector. It means you're interested in talking about how to get your family involved and how to introduce this to the most important people in your life. And if you would hand these in to Liz or Heidi or Karen on the way out, then they will give you a CD. Do we have enough CDs for everyone? I think we do. So everyone can just take a CD. Just hand in the card. That's your only ticket to get one. So thank you all for coming. I'm so glad you were here, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. I'll stick around and answer questions for anyone. Thanks. All right, now I am going to get us started. We're going to have dinner together. And one of my, my clients, I guess, a long time ago, they're not here in the room, just so some of you would be worried about that, asked me one time,